Welcome everybody. It's been a long time since we've all been here together in this space, so we're so glad you could make it with us today. Welcome to our AC Connect session this evening. My name is Leah. I'm a member of the Alberta Early Learning Leaders Caucus and on the board of the Childcare, Canadian Childcare Federation. And I'll be one of your facilitators for this evening. And this is Christy. Do you want to say who you are?
Hi, my name is Christy Scarlett. I sit on the board of AECEA as well as the Canadian Childcare Federation. So welcome everybody. It has been a long time since I think June was our last one.
So yeah, May or June. So
yeah,
I was thinking about that, and it's, just thinking, I mean, summer is busy and we all have lots of things to do. And it's not actually, we didn't do it at the end of October because we didn't want to, or we didn't have things to talk about. Honestly, things have been moving so quickly in terms of, pandemic things and government things and election things. And so every time we thought we were organized to talk about one topic, things would change. And so then we'd be like, okay, we have to reorganize to think about a new topic. So, we want to respect your time and make sure this is valuable for people who are able to attend. So we're really glad that there's actually a number of people on tonight. So that's fantastic. So welcome.
Yeah, and I think
so, we still, go ahead, Christy.
I think this is one of the topics that has seemed to stick for the last couple months anyways. We heard and we listened to what everybody was typing on social media and how they're responding. And so we felt that we would invite Dawn and Jen out to do this presentation for us and answer some questions. So.
So a couple things before we turn it over to them, just around sort of how it'll work tonight and what we're going to be doing. So technology. So we will be recording. We're already recording, so that anyone who isn't able to attend tonight can listen to the recording later. It'll be posted on the AC website. And just to know, it's quite possible we'll go over time tonight. So we might go later than 8 o'clock, and that's another reason for recording. So if you actually can't stay for the whole thing, you can go back and listen to the recording after. So the recording will be made available through AC afterwards, so you can catch up on what you missed, or you can recommend to other people to listen. So there will be time for, we hope, time for some questions and feedback and conversation towards the end of the presentation. So a couple things about how that works on this platform. So you are able to use your microphone and speak. The way it works on this platform is you have to use the hand up function. So you should have that on the little toolbar, which is on your right. And so when you put your hand up, and then one of the organizers will unmute you on our end, and then we'll ask you to speak. You'll still have to unmute yourself on your end before you can speak. If you don't want to speak, or you don't have a microphone or whatever, there's a question box. It's also in that right side panel, so you can type your question in there, and we will be monitoring the question panel, and when we have an opportunity, we'll ask those questions. So do use the hand up function. If you don't actually want to say anything, or you don't have a microphone, then please don't put your hand up, because it takes away time from other people being able to share during that. Please feel free to use the question panel at any point, because we'll go back to those questions when we have an opportunity later. And this platform is really about connecting. That's why we started it at the beginning of the pandemic, and it's still something we want to prioritize as we're gathering here, about thinking together and sharing thoughts and resources. That's why we've invited Dawn and Jen to kind of share some of those thinking with us. And so we want to prioritize connection and respectful feedback, and the idea that we're not here to have answers. We're here to sort of think through questions together and kind of bring all of our brains to bear on this. And one last thing before I introduce Jen and Dawn, our speakers for tonight, just a very quick plug for the ARC National Child Day Conference coming up in November, so about a month from now, the 18th to the 21st. It is a virtual conference again this year. There's lots of great speakers. It does qualify for the PD funding and the release time funding, the new funding from Children's Services. So you can access both aspects of that. And it's sort of marking children's right to well-being and citizenship as the 30th anniversary of Canada's ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So that's all I'll say about that. And for now, I will just let you know that we are happy to welcome Dawn Giesbrecht from the Canadian Childcare Federation and Jennifer Usher on behalf of the Association for Early Childhood Educators of Alberta. I always say the A's backwards, Alberta Association. So welcome, we're so happy you guys could join us, and I'll turn it over to you to give us the lowdown on why $10 a day is important for ECEs.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for having us tonight. We're really excited to be here and to see such a great turnout and to talk a little bit about how $10 a day can be good for ECEs. And Dawn is here from Canadian Childcare Federation. Do you want to say hi as well?
Yeah, thanks so much, Leah and Christy. It's my pleasure to be here tonight and joining in with everybody from Alberta. Fantastic.
All right, so Laura is going to be our slide master, so she will be moving our slides ahead. So go ahead, Laura. All right, I just wanted to remind everybody about the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Alberta's vision. We see a future in which there is a well-qualified, well-compensated early childhood educator workforce that's respected as professionals, valued for their important work, and supported in providing high-quality childcare for Alberta's children and families. Dawn,
yeah, absolutely, thanks. And the Federation, very simply committed to achieving excellence in early learning and childcare. And of course, excellence cannot happen without exactly what Jennifer just said, a well-respected, professional workforce that provides the care and education for young children.
Okay, Dawn, you're up on this one.
Yeah, perfect. So I would hope you all know that in the federal budget this year and brought down in April, the federal government made a very significant commitment to early learning and childcare from a number of different angles. And most certainly one of the most prominent angles was all about economic recovery, and that women were disproportionately affected and have been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. And the way to help jumpstart and invigorate Canada's economy, Alberta's economy, is to get more women into the workforce. And so to that, they committed historic amounts of money to make this happen, and they've been working on building this Canada-wide system ever since. And so as it says here, almost $34 billion for the entire country over 5 years. Of which almost $100 million is going into Indigenous early learning and childcare, which is also historic and also so important. And by the way, if you've never read the Indigenous early learning and childcare framework, I think it is an important part of all of our learning and understanding for reconciliation. It's available online. You just have to search for it. I encourage you to read it because it is such a transformational document. It is moving over to what we call supply side funding, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we go on here tonight. It's about entrenching childcare and early learning into the processes and the policies, not just in one department of government, but in all departments of government where it touches. And so to that, they want to and have already started to build a federal secretariat specific to early learning and care. They're going to be bringing forward legislation here more than likely this fall yet or early winter, and being advised by a national advisory council. All of these pieces are in play. Then of course we all know that we headed to an election in August, and the election happened in September, and one of the most prevalent issues on the ballot for this government was childcare and continuing on and getting that mandate to continue the work that they started in the federal budget. And of course they were reelected, and so here we are today pushing forward on building this Canada-wide system, which is why we're all chatting here today.
So we at the Association of Early Childhood Educators of Alberta really do believe that now is the time to support that federal government plan to build a system of early learning and childcare, because we believe that it will be good for children, families, and early childhood educators programs as well, and society too. So we just believe that this system building can really increase the equity for all of Canada's citizens. So when we talk about a system, sometimes it's sort of confusing about what that really means. But what we're talking about is a system is a set of elements or pieces that really work together in an interconnected network. So each piece is equally important and must be considered in relation to every other piece. So you can see our AECEA model, it's adapted from the Quality by Design project. And we do have some really great resources on the AECEA website that talks more about all of these different parts of a system. You'll see values, goals and curriculum, governance and infrastructure, public management and accountability, data, research and evaluation, planning and policy, funding, which we're going to talk about tonight, and of course, early childhood educators, making sure that they have the educational qualifications and professional learning they need to provide quality early learning and childcare, and to earn decent wages in supportive workplaces. The last part of that system is the physical environment as well. So the thing is that we want to see a system being built so that it's not just little pieces, a piecemeal approach. We want to get away from that and really build something that can work for everyone.
All right. So as to build on what Jennifer just said, and this, you know, I was saying earlier before we went live, like talking about how to build a system is really, you know, it's a longer conversation, but we're going to dive into it here tonight and try to give you as much information on this as possible within our short time. And so I've got a number of slides here that are coming up specific to this. But one of the ways I want people to think about this is, how is education in Alberta, how is education in Canada put together, right? It is a system. When pandemic happened, yes, sometimes in certain provinces, schools shut down and they went to remote learning. But teachers continued to work, principals continued to work, the system continued to function. What happened when COVID hit childcare in this country? Every province reacted differently, although there are themes in there. But for the most part, in Canada, it was a really fragmented approach where programs were shut down, ECEs and others working in programs were laid off, went on CERB or whatever other mechanisms were there to support them. Programs shut down. We know Alberta, from data gathering we've done and surveying we've done, we know Alberta actually is one of the hardest hit provinces in terms of programs shutting down because it's not a system, right? And I'm going to get into this a bit more, but it's a sector, it's structures that rely primarily on parent fees. And if you're not open, pretty hard to charge parents money. And so that's where it starts to, you know, those cracks and those foundations and those structures that support childcare, that's where they started to fall apart. And that's where one of the primary motives behind the federal plan for childcare. So I just want you to think about education and how the system works. And I'm not suggesting to any of you here today that education system is perfect. No system is entirely perfect, and systems are always changing and evolving and getting better. And so that is an important lens to bring to this. Think about it as, like that, but also appreciating that it's not perfect, and we are not going to be perfect when we start, but we're going to move to a better place than we are today and not so vulnerable as the pandemic has shown. We were vulnerable before as a sector, before the pandemic. Pandemic just brought out everything that that proves the vulnerability and demonstrates the vulnerabilities of our sector. All right, so here we are, the Canada-wide childcare plan. This is a little report card. So prior to the election, the federal election that is, 8 of Canada's 13 jurisdictions have signed an agreement with the federal government to fund and build policy and build systems specific to early learning and childcare. And so, you know, the neighbors to the west of you in BC have signed, and the neighbors to the east of you, being both Saskatchewan and Manitoba, both signed agreements in and around mid to late August. Actually mid-August, I should say, because the writ was dropped in just afterwards. Anyways, so I've highlighted there the provinces that are still waiting to sign their agreements: New Brunswick, Ontario, Alberta, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. And so, yes, fair enough. You could say, well, Alberta has not signed this agreement yet. And so, you know, some of what you're saying and Jen is saying tonight could be somewhat speculative. I guarantee you it's not speculative, okay? And if we went into all these agreements, you're gonna see certain themes coming out of them, specific to affordability, specific to the workforce, specific to quality, in terms also growth of spaces, accessibility, cultural safety, and certainly there's pieces in there too for Indigenous early learning and childcare as well. I can tell you definitively that all these jurisdictions are actively negotiating with the federal government to bring an agreement to the table for their citizens. So yes, we are talking about other agreements and how they've worked and what it means, taking lessons from them for all of you, but it will happen in Alberta. I promise you that. So go ahead, Laura, and change the slide. Thanks. So there's important to bring some context to this conversation then too. You all know this, you know, you all live this, but these are pan-Canadian issues, and these are these long-standing structural issues that impact the early learning and care sector. Affordability for families, quality is here, there, and everywhere, all across the country, not just, you know, not just in Alberta and Edmonton and Calgary, it's everywhere. Quality is here, there, and everywhere. Accessibility of spaces, especially pre-pandemic, right? We know that parents were not finding the spaces they necessarily wanted. We all know stories about families who they're desperate for a spot, so they'll take whatever they can get. It's not necessarily meshing with their values or their beliefs or even in their communities, but they'll take what they can get. We know pandemics impacted that, and we know people still work from home. But as we start to move to a different reality in this country specific to childcare, accessibility is going to be a big issue. Of course, the workforce. We know that we do not retain and recruit enough people to work in this sector. We know that educational requirements are all over the map in Canada. We know that quality is intrinsically tied to education of the workforce, right? To actually have credentials that say that, you know, I've done my studying with regards to pedagogy and practice and so on and so forth. So we're providing children with those very best early learning opportunities and care along with that. And then of course, we all know this too, this reality of the political policy, the fundings, the directions that our provincial governments take across Canada. Some take, you know, much more keen interest in childcare, others not. And so what the Canada-wide plan is attempting to do is getting everybody much closer to being on the same page. And again, I encourage you to think about education. I'll ask you this, and this is a rhetorical question. And if you've ever heard me speak before, I say this often. Who decided that age 5 was the age at which children should enter the formal school system? Because it's an arbitrary age. It's an arbitrary age. But we know that those early years are so important in human development, right? We know that, but we've never really caught up with funding and policy until now, specific to those early years. And we also know then when you are age 5, it doesn't matter if you're in Alberta or if you're in Newfoundland, Labrador, or if you're in Northwest Territories, you have a right to find a spot, a space, a seat in a school of your choice. That's important. That's really important in how we think about systems, and that we need to get to that place as well for the youngest children in our country, so that they too, no matter where a family lives, will have access to affordable, high quality childcare, of which a really well-educated, well-compensated workforce is a part of that. So these are not unique issues. You all live and breathe these every day, and this is part of those foundational pieces that are so flawed right now in Canada that we're working to fix. Go ahead, Laura. All right, so really quickly here, the way Canada is set up in terms of how it funds childcare, for the most part, Quebec and PEI actually are two of the biggest different provinces specific to this. But we have what we call demand side funding, and that's because childcare in Canada is really defined as a market commodity, that you go out and you buy and pay for a service. Again, if we use education as an example, that's not how we fund and build an education system, but that's how we funded and built childcare in this country. So specific to that then, so if you put the childcare program at the middle, and be it family or home childcare or center-based care, you've got this myriad of funding sources. So you've got some grants, you've got maybe some contributions for wages somewhere in there. Maybe you do fundraisers as a program, and then you've got your fees and your subsidies, right? And we know that fees are really high for the most part in this country. Again, Quebec being an exception to that. But even in provinces where fees aren't that expensive, or as compared to others, they're still expensive, right? I think about this. I know that the $25 a day plan in Alberta has gone the way of the dodo bird. But at the time, or certainly a lot of you have said during when it was happening and post when it was shut down, like, man, that was affordable, and it was actually a way of getting Alberta into a supply side funding model. But when you think about it, $25 a day is still like $500 a month. That's not cheap, right? That's not cheap, even though in the context of Alberta, it was cheap, because it was cheaper than what you're going to pay at many other childcare programs. And I think about Manitoba, where preschool space is about $22 a month, and that's deemed somewhat more affordable than other provinces. But it's still expensive for families, especially in this is a whole other conversation when we start to talk about those economic pressures that families are under. But the bottom line is this: demand side funding is that we take all these different pieces of revenue that come into a program to fund its operations. We know operations cost more year over year. We know that paying your staff is probably the biggest line in any program's budget. And it's really a disconnect then for parents who say, I'm paying $50, $60, $70, $80 a day for my childcare, but I'm hearing that the folks working in this program aren't really actually making a lot of money. Why is that? Well, it's because it's broken, right? The system is broken, in that you have to charge parents more money to support your operations, of which salaries are a big piece. And so those fees keep going up, 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 and up, and it gets to where we are today. Yet we still can encounter workforce problems, and we still can't build enough access, and we still don't have enough money to support quality for all and inclusivity and so on and so forth. That's demand side funding. So again, that's not how education is built, right? Education is not built on all these different little levels of money that come in. It's built on supply side funding, which is funding the service. So we can change the slide, please. So I touched on this a little bit, right? And this is just exactly the way it is played out in Canada specific to COVID. If you're shut down, you're not charging fees. You're not fundraising. Your grants from your provincial government or territorial government or local government, however that's working, may or may not have been impacted. For the most part in Canada, they were impacted. those other, whatever other sources of revenue that you had coming in, maybe, you know, who knows what else they might be, those were impacted. Really, the only reasons for the most part in Canada, not exclusively, but for the most part in Canada, that childcare survived as intact as it has, and it's not a fulsome intact, it is what we have today, is because the federal government stepped in with the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, as well as the Canada Emergency Business Account, and like I said before, CERB and other funding programs. Canada's early learning and care sector would have absolutely imploded had it not been for these two revenue streams. And that was, in a way, you know, some of the first forays that the federal government stepped in to support the sector, specific to those funding mechanisms. So when you pulled away those fees and all those other things that help to, you know, fund that or fuel that demand side funding, it showed how fragile childcare is. And yet it's so essential, right? We know it's essential. We know that childcare in many provinces still had to stay open because the essential workers, so-called essential workers, needed childcare to go do their essential work. So really, childcare is the essential of the essential, right? That's how important it is in terms of our economy, in terms of our society. So go ahead and change the slide, please. So supply side funding, and again, this is just a real quick version of, or explanation of it, is taking all those pockets of money, moving it over to the other side of the equation and saying, we are going to fund the service. We are going to give you childcare program enough money to charge affordable fees, so enough public money between the federal government and the province, enough money to fund affordable childcare fees, to pay your ECEs and everybody who works in your programs good wages, benefits, educational opportunities, things like that. In other words, build a workforce strategy so we can attack all these issues. We're going to be able to have inclusive, accessible, high quality programming, and we're going to be able to expand our services and really get into what we call those childcare deserts, communities, rural, urban, remote, that don't have access to quality childcare. It's about moving all those pieces to the other side. And yes, there's still fees, but the goal is an average of $10 a day across Canada. Very affordable, especially when you consider what families are paying now in Alberta and BC, in Ontario, many other places. But the point is that if we get to another, and I hope we never are in another situation like COVID in our lifetime or many other lifetimes or whatever it is, the childcare program will not be so vulnerable because it's got supply side funding. It's putting all this money here supported by the federal government, and fees are a part of it, but they're not the core part of it. And you're not having to chase all these different pieces of money and all these different pockets of money to support your operations. You're going to core fund those operations, very similar to how the education system is funded. Again, that is a really quick overview of what that means, but it is really hard for us in this sector to think about that reality, but it's happening right in front of our eyes, that we're moving over to this supply side funding model rather than demand side funding. Go ahead and change the slide.
Thanks, Dawn. That was really great. I know it's such a hard concept to talk about, and like you said, we could have probably spent a whole webinar on just this one section. So thanks for that overview. I do want to let everybody know that there is going to be an Alberta policy roadmap towards advancing the Canada-wide system of early learning and childcare coming out soon. So the Canadian Childcare Federation, Childcare Now, the YMCA of Northern Alberta, and the Matart Foundation convened a diverse group of stakeholders over the summer to really sit down and discuss elements of this system and start to develop a provincial policy roadmap. We've seen those kind of things come out already. There is one from the National Childcare Now organization. Ontario has a roadmap to universal childcare. But really what we needed to do was have an individualized roadmap that would look at our provincial context and move us towards building that stronger system. So that will be coming out soon, and we're hoping that that serves as a foundational working document for early learning and childcare stakeholders and the broader community to better understand those system elements, how they're going to work together, and then to start the conversation. To start the collaboration about what this could really look like. And so tonight, Dawn and I have been and will be continuing to talk about some of the other jurisdictions, how they've put things in place in their agreements and are starting to work towards that development of a system. And then, what it could look like here in Alberta. So definitely stay tuned for more information on that. And I'm assuming there'll probably be some kind of an AECEA Connect around that as it is released. You can go to the next slide, Laura. So this again is just one of our sort of memes from social media. But what I liked about it is that it's really calling out the part about the early childhood educator workforce. So we do believe that there needs to be a comprehensive strategy that looks at all of the elements and really looks at qualifications, compensation, and all of that kind of thing, because we know that without early childhood educators, there can be no early learning and childcare. So in the federal budget document, it did specifically talk about the workforce, and I just loved some of the words in this, so I wanted to share that part with you. It said, a growing qualified workforce with provincial and territorial partners. The government will work to ensure that early childhood educators are at the heart of the system by valuing their work and providing them with the training and development opportunities needed to support their growth and the growth of a quality system of childcare. So we do know that Minister Hassan, who was the federal minister in charge of this, these are some of the words that he was saying during some of our conversations. We do now have a new federal minister who will be in charge of this project or this building of the system, and I'm sure we'll be sharing more information about that soon. So like I said in that last one, we do understand that early childhood educators are the heart of that system and they must be highly valued. At AECEA, we believe they must be well qualified with a foundation of post-secondary early learning and childcare knowledge. And that's not just our opinion, right? That's based on the research that's out there that talks about how quality is so tied to educational qualifications. And of course, we believe that early childhood educators should be paid well and they must have good working conditions. So these are some of the things that we think in a workforce strategy in the national system, it could be built in so that it's really supporting educators. And like Dawn was talking about, there is that supply side funding coming in to provide that funding for good wages and better working conditions, educational opportunities, that kind of thing. So that's where that funding would come from. So these are some rough graphs that I did up from something called the AECEA report, which was through the Atkinson Center. And Alberta does have one of the highest wage enhancements in the country. We do see in the Yukon, they do have a wage enhancement that ranges from $1.85 to $12.11 per hour, depending on location and certification level. I think that's obviously changing because Yukon has signed their agreement. So I think they were having a base wage of $30 an hour. Is that right, Dawn?
Yep.
Do you remember?
Yep,
Yeah.
it is. Yep.
Yeah. So before they signed that agreement, they were having these wage enhancements. Newfoundland and Labrador, they pay a wage enhancement of approximately $6.20 to $8.13. So Alberta is definitely up there in the wage enhancement part of the sector, or the way that we pay our educators. I guess the thing that I would like to point out is that despite our high wage enhancements, Alberta ranks 11 out of 13 provinces and territories. So we are in the bottom of the wages that are being paid to early childhood educators. So I think Dawn's going to talk a little bit here about how we could see that compensation being definitely supported in a much better way.
Yeah. And so, you know, wage enhancement is a perfect example of why it needs to be fixed, right? Because enhancements or wage grants, wage enhancement grants, because they exist in many provinces. Number one, they're vulnerable to whatever government is of the day. Number two, it's part of that piecemeal funding approach. It doesn't attract people to the sector. It doesn't retain people in the sector, and it could be gone at the stroke of a pen tomorrow. And so this is an important part of how we move forward, as Jen was talking about. And so when we talk about this, we need to be really thinking about that wages, no matter where they are, need to be competitive, and they need to be a living wage. And nobody working in this sector should be working for less than a living wage. And that doesn't matter where you are in Canada, that's going to vary. But you know, and this one really hit me actually earlier this year in Nova Scotia, believe it or not, where they've been moving forward quite a bit in their sector in system building. And you know, yes, you've got ECEs who are credentialed, who've gone to, you know, let's say college or university, and they've got their formal credential. And then you've got a lot of other folks that work in our sector. And typically, you know, the others that aren't credentialed don't make as much money. We know this. But we also know then from many studies that so many people in our sector work 2 jobs. Well, why is that? And even in some cases 3 jobs. Well, it's because they don't make enough in their primary job working in childcare to pay their rent, to put food on the table, and so on and so forth. We've got a workforce that's 97% women, 250,000 women that work in Canada's licensed and regulated childcare sector, of which the majority are being marginalized in terms of their economic security and don't have a living wage. So we need to then, as we're thinking about this, is thinking about wage floors. What is that minimum, that living wage minimum, and bringing in scales, as Jen talked about there. So I give you this example, and this is just an example of work that's happened in Manitoba, where they have what's called the Market Competitive Salary Guideline Scale. Now, I want to be clear about this. This is not government. This is your sister organization in Manitoba called the Manitoba Childcare Association, but they do this work. Every year they update their salary scales. So I've just put in this, it's much broader than this, and there's more levels and more categories than just this, but this is for ECEs. And this is how Manitoba does it, ECE 2s and 3s. So this is based on 2020, so it hasn't been updated for 2021, and this is pre-Canada-wide plan. But you can see here that in the Manitoba market, someone who has a credential, ECE, who's gone to college, university, or however they've got their credential, should be making a minimum of almost $21 an hour and topping out at about $26 an hour. So I want to share this with you then. When Manitoba announced their agreement with the federal government, Minister of Families in Manitoba, Heather Stephenson, said at the press conference, so I also, sorry, you should back up here a little bit. This is aspirational. This isn't necessarily what ECs are getting paid in Manitoba, okay? This is saying what they should be paid. An ECE, a credentialed ECE in Manitoba, should be making at least $15.25 an hour, $15.25 an hour. That is the floor for an ECE. Minister Heather Stephenson at the announcement in August said that an ECE will be making at least $25 an hour. At least $25 an hour. So for many ECEs in Manitoba, that is going to be a $10 an hour increase to what they're making right now. And the same is playing out in other jurisdictions, because all these agreements that have been signed all have the workforce, as Jen so eloquently put in terms of how it was said in the federal budget. Every agreement with the federal government has pinned a workforce strategy into it and paying ECEs more money. That is so important for each and every one of you and for everybody in Canada. So go ahead, Laura, and change the slide, please. And just related to this, and again, this is pre-Canada-wide plan. Did you know that Manitoba and Quebec are the only two jurisdictions in Canada that actually have registered funded pension plans for their sectors? This should be the norm for all of you. This should be the norm. I have heard so many heartbreaking stories from, again, primarily women who have been in the sector for so many years and cannot afford to retire, but of course cannot physically continue to work in childcare because it is a physically demanding job. They don't have that opportunity. And so they're either, figuring out another job or a transition of some point, but their economic security is completely challenged because there are not mechanisms like funded pensions. And this should be a part of every workforce strategy that we need to aspire to. So quickly in Manitoba, if you're in the sector, ECE director, supervisor, or just more of a newer staff working, maybe you don't have your credential. As long as you've put, it used to be 2 years, I think it's 1 year now. As long as you've put in a minimum amount of time and committed somewhat to the sector, you get 4% of your salary matched into a registered pension. So and if you're younger, I understand that maybe you're not thinking about age 65 or whatever age you want to retire, but let me tell you, that is really important. That is really important. And if you're a home or family childcare provider in Manitoba, again, it's based on your credential and what classification you are, but the province is actually matching RRSP contributions as well, so that you can retire with some form of pension as well through an RRSP. That should not be the exception. There should not be just 2 jurisdictions. It should be 13 jurisdictions that are putting things like this into place as we build out this system, because you all deserve it. Everybody working in this sector deserves to be able to retire with dignity when that time comes. Okay, Laura, thanks.
So one of the other parts of the workforce strategy that we would like to just cover quickly is talking a little bit about working conditions. And so we do know that good working conditions include things that are like those that are listed here. So having a stable workplace, that meaning it be well funded. So if it is through supply side funding, it's going to weather the storm of something like a pandemic much better, just like the schools did than our early learning and childcare programs did. So having that stability, knowing that your program is going to be there, knowing that your job is going to be there. Also having support to further your education and professional learning opportunities, that's just so vital. And it has been a really great positive step that we've seen recently with having more professional development funding, having that available to preschool and day home educators. We're just really excited about all of those things. So it's a step in the right direction. If we could build a system to really support all of these working conditions for educators, I just think it would just be amazing. So a few other things to think about in terms of those working conditions are pedagogical partner and mentor support. That's such a valuable thing, to be reflecting on your practice and having that critical friend that you can speak to and who is there to help you reflect on your pedagogy and make those improvements or changes as things go along. Also inclusion supports, of course, for children with exceptionalities of any kind. It can be really challenging for educators to work with children who have different needs that need to be addressed. Paid release time, of course, that's something we have seen recently for advancing education and workshops, but I definitely think that should also include pedagogical work. And then paid non-contact time for things like staff meetings, room prep, reflection and planning. So really taking the time to think about educators as the professionals that they truly are, and then supporting them to do that work. So it's not just, you know, off the side of your desk. You guys don't really have a desk, but like, you know, doing it in the evenings, doing it on your own time, that it's really valued. Your work is valued. All of that hard work that you put in. So now we would like to welcome Amanda Harder. She is an early childhood educator who works at Bowness Montgomery with the Thornhill Childcare Society in Calgary. Her program was a $25 a day early learning and childcare center for 3 years, maybe a little bit more. I'm not sure if you guys got the transitional funding, Amanda, but what it meant was that they did receive that supply side funding to operate that program. And it is similar to what the national system would propose to do. So we thought it would be great to hear from her as somebody who's working on the floor with children, to hear her experience about how that supply side funding changed things for her as an educator.
Hello, I'm very excited to be here. Sorry, I'm going to be looking down. I'm reading a little bit here, but you know, I'm really excited to be here anytime I get a chance to advocate for the $25 a day program or anything, universal childcare program. I'm your gal. So I have been practicing with with Bowness Montgomery since June of 2018, which is actually like right around when they started getting their funding and looking more into flight curriculum. I was there during the time while I was getting my my diploma for early learning and childcare while attending Bow Valley College. Like I said, I was very excited, and you know, it was kind of like a unicorn because I had only heard whispers about a $25 a day center, like no clue what that entailed. And you know, it was just really interesting to be at the beginnings of it and starting it all. And I was told that there was going to be a coach for us, which was fantastic. Sorry about that. And so a pedagogical partner, like Jennifer was talking about. And it, like, I am so grateful for that opportunity to be able to be part of that and watch the shift go from before to after. Yeah, and so some things that really definitely I can mention that is a big growth for me was like, especially my practice as an educator. Like we talked about before, the reflective practice, you know, it was an all of a sudden question of why in all areas. Why am I setting up the classroom the way I am? Why did I set up that activity? Why did I choose these materials? Why did I interpret the children's play the way that I did? You know, this digging deeper kind of helped us to understand our own values, beliefs, morals, and motivations, and what they were and how they were being presented in the classroom. We were asking questions like, what are our images of the child? What are our images of their family, the community, what the role of the educator looks like? You know, and then we kind of got to notice how these images influence our practice. Our coach, a pedagogical partner, helped us bring forth these questions and provided many training opportunities to think deeper. She came for visits in our classroom, which was really helpful. She looked at our documentation we had, you know, and asked questions to really open up our minds to different perspectives. She also like we had training nights in the evenings after work, and then where we could try different exercises. And you know, it was just something that she helped us to think beyond what was right in front of us, you know, and build intention and then know how to explain it, which was incredible and very valuable for us because it helped us build our confidence as educators, you know, and feel that we very much deserve that title of an educator. you know, and actually our director was very adamant that we call ourselves that, and it really helped. You know, we could now with confidence explain our intentions in a professional way. It was very empowering. Like I personally had an instant urge to share all my documentation, make it visible, and you know, at the end of the day, I had more to share than he or she had a good day, or you know, just covering the basic needs of what happened in the day. You know, now we're collaborating together and we're building that connection, which is very important. It just was a much more a richer experience. And you know, what was really cool was seeing this shift too of educators bringing this into our planning meetings, which you know, they were great already, but it was just like we could see this growth happening and there's more perspectives happening. It really came alive. Everybody was excited, and you know, we had more ideas and we celebrated each other's successes, and we kind of like asked these questions to help each other grow. And you know, one thing that I'm grateful for though is that despite the grant leaving, this has stayed, and you know, families, children, and the community still get to benefit from it, which I'm very grateful for. Another way our center grew was obviously financially, and we had, this is a really important point to make, is that we had the right leadership to ensure that the funding went to the right places. I cannot emphasize that enough. You know, it was really incredible, like all the things that were listed in there previous that Jennifer was mentioning, that's exactly where things went, you know. The center could now easily afford to have every single educator an early childcare supervisor, level 3, or working to become one, which was great because I was still in school, and that meant I had many mentors everywhere. It was a good feeling to also be there where management wanted highly educated individuals and felt that like I deserve that investment, and I still had a spot here even though my base pay went up. And you know, that was really important to me. And so with that, our base pay did go up, which is very well deserved. You know, we do a lot in a day, we wear many hats. You know, I can swear like it feels like I make more choices in a day than maybe a doctor would. Maybe. I won't say that. They're probably doing a lot right now. I should not say that. But maybe on par. But anyways, I definitely do find that you know, before this, I did feel very undervalued as an educator, you know, somewhere where somebody's just dropping off their kids and, you know, want to get in, get out, and that kind of thing. And, you know, kind of micromanaged us. But then this, like, you know, really, like the grant and everything coming through made me feel like society valued us and deemed us as important. And, you know, we truly, is like everything you learn about, especially advocacy and everything, it was like, boom, we totally deserve that and it should come, you know. And so it was really cool to watch. And, you know, I know we didn't go to school to learn how to babysit and supervise, you know, and it's great to hear everybody here talk today. And that makes me feel good that we have people like this in leadership that know that too. You know, we are educated individuals who are professionals and deserve to be treated as such. And please don't ever forget it, you know. But also we had, so with this more finances, we have more funding for materials, field trips, training, classroom enhancements, opportunities to grow as an AECE, you know, into different areas of childcare, because now there was funding to create different roles. We had enhancement time, which meant that another educator could cover our ratio while we went to write a learning story and put documentation together or attend any training. We could get materials together for a classroom or put them away, you know, or to help with cleaning, reorganizing. And the biggest part is that educators stopped using our personal time and our money that we felt we needed to use. There's countless educators out there, myself included, that use their own funds out of our very low salary and our own personal time to make our classroom up to par. And just because we're willing to do this, you know, doesn't make it right to use that. It felt amazing to have that time and money back for us personally, for me, you know, and I saw the difference, that the grants made for families and surrounding community, which made my job way more meaningful and exciting. I witnessed a family of 2 parents and 2 children have a parent be able to go comfortably, financially comfortably, back to school, finish their degree while having both children in our care. Another family that was a single parent with 2 children going to school to obtain a secondary education and able to afford having both children in care at the same time. Like, it, so amazing to watch. You know, we had a lot of lower and middle income families being able to affordably have their children in care and also go to work and still have money left over to live their lives and work and to make their circumstances better. Now families had less stress at home, which means their children were experiencing less stress, which means they are less stressed in the classroom and more able to regulate, learn, and be themselves. And, you know, once the government announced that they were pulling the pilot program and grants, it was an instant onset of sadness. Like, you know, I, as AECE, was deeply devastated as I seen it as a step back in our industry. Our pay was decreased, fees for families were increased, we lost educators' positions that were very valuable to enriching our center. Families that were once thriving were now very worried about what this meant for their futures. And, you know, who was there to talk them through it but us? And it was really hard. You know, families who really needed our care were now terminating because of increased fees, even though our fees were lower than most centers around. And, you know, that same family that I mentioned with the single parent and 2 children, I watched as that parent struggled with what to do while they were in school, ended up just going back to the job they had before school, which is really heartbreaking to see. Like I said, I advocate whenever I can to explain that all that came with the $25 a day program. I talk to my neighbors, friends, anybody who'll listen. And then what could also come from a universal childcare plan. You know, what is really hard and frustrating to see as an educator that has witnessed this rise and fall very fast, it's not been long, in our province, is that the ones who suffer the most are and least deserve to are the children. It is my job to advocate for them and have been trained to do so in college. I personally feel, though, that I should not have to explain why every child needs, has the right to, and deserves high quality, safe places to be a child that are affordable and easily accessible, where children are encouraged daily to explore their world, ask questions, try new things, make mistakes, participate in group experiences, feel validated in their emotions and choices. A place where being a child, no matter what that looks like, is accepted. For most families in Alberta, having $10 a day childcare, having a $10 a day childcare option would mean not feeling like they're drowning constantly. Children's futures are invested in because they have a safe and secure place like Bowness Montgomery to attend daily, where they're viewed as active citizens and play an important role in their communities. And for most educators and centers in Alberta, $10 a day funding means that our centers are invested in. We receive a pay that we deserve and the funding to create more opportunities and roles throughout childcare, lessen the added workload, receive more training to better our practice, and have more centers that are thriving like Bowness. I have worked in 2 other centers previous to Bowness, and I can't tell you what they would have done with a grant or what their centers would have looked like with a grant. But now maybe you can understand the potential that could come from having a $10 a day program. And again, I'm so greatly appreciative of this opportunity. And yeah, I hope I was able to shed like a little bit of light on it. Amazing center, and yeah, so grateful for this. So thank you.
Wow, Amanda, you like make me want to choke up almost. It's just such an impactful story that you're sharing here about how it's really affected yourself as an educator, the children, the families, your program. Like that's really meaningful. And I hope that other early childhood educators can take something from that real life experience. Dawn, did you want to make a comment?
No, that other than what you just said, Jennifer, that was great, Amanda, and the potential of
Right.
what's happening right now. It's what I took away from that, and how meaningful that was to you as a professional, and how meaningful it will be to you as this goes forward.
Yes, I'm very excited. I push all the time.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So I guess that's the place I would like to sort of almost end here tonight is really talking about the fact that we do need to be pushing, right? We need to be advocating for this. AECEA and the Canadian Childcare Federation have been hard at work advocating for Alberta to sign an agreement. And then we've also been advocating with other organizations like the Childcare Now National and Alberta chapter, Public Interest Alberta. And so all these groups are coming together and really stepping up to say that we need to have this national system agreement signed here in Alberta. And I would highly recommend you check out all of these organizations' websites and Facebook pages. There is a ton of excellent information that you can share out to build the momentum and keep that momentum going. I know the Canadian Childcare Now Alberta petition got 1,800 signatures, I think just over 1,800 signatures in a pretty quick turnaround. So that's really exciting news. So make sure you check them out and see how you can become more involved in advocating on this. So of course, I'm going to put a little plug in for membership, because I do believe that membership is a way that you are advocating, supporting your professional organization. The Association of Early Childhood Educators of Alberta is one way that you can advocate for yourself as an early childhood educator. And I don't know if you know, but if you become a member of AECEA, you actually become a member of the Canadian Childcare Federation. So it's all sort of bundled together, which is really amazing. So I highly recommend you check out AECEA's website under membership. There's lots of excellent benefits, but I think the number one benefit I see is just really supporting that advocacy work. There is a volunteer board at AECEA, and I know Canadian Childcare Federation, runs lean as well. And, we really should be supporting these organizations that are working so hard on your behalf. So yeah, this is the spot where we thought we might come to some questions or some conversation.
So I have one from previous in the session today, and I think it's one I'm not sure whether Dawn or Jen, which one would be best answered by, but Heather Hunt is wondering any indication of how day home educators' wages may be impacted since they aren't paid per hour. Do either of you know how we're seeing that in other provinces?
Yeah, so it's interesting because family or home childcare is treated a little bit different in each jurisdiction. But here's just a good example of that. So Saskatchewan has a very ambitious growth target, expansion target. And as it sits right now, one of their primary areas of growth that they want to grow the sector in is in family or home childcare. Very ambitious, very ambitious. What they haven't shared then are what are the details as to how are we going to encourage people to open up family childcare or home childcare in their homes. But it is fair to say that family childcare is an important element of childcare system building. And that when we talk about compensation, that is part of those conversations. You're right, they don't get paid by the hour, but then if you're part of that, part of the license regulated system and the $10 a day system, we'll use that language, you would need to receive supply side funding to help increase your wages. So how that fleshes out and how that's going to be handled in every jurisdiction is I think one of those details that we're still seeing or we're going to have to see come out. But rest assured that nobody is going to be left behind here specific to system building.
Yeah, I will say too that AC has regular meetings with the ECD branch at the government of Alberta, and we have heard like very clearly that licensed day home educators and licensed day home agencies will be a part of that system.
Okay, Laura, can I just jump in here too, and and maybe the questions come up, so maybe I'm getting a little ahead here. But one of the things that right now the agreements in Canada, the ones that have been signed, haven't necessarily talked about out of school or school age childcare. But that's an important element of system building too. So I don't want to just, yes, I talked earlier, and Jennifer as well, like we talked all about the early years, but let's not also forget out of school and school age care, because that's really important. And while it may not be formally in the agreements right now, it should never leave our lens of how we're building systems and how important school age care is, because just like I said earlier, that age 5 was a pretty arbitrary age to start school. Just because a child turns age 5 doesn't mean they don't need childcare anymore either, right? It goes on. So that has to be a part of our ongoing conversations, our ongoing advocacy, and how does that fit into the system building as well.
That's a really good point, Dawn, and you're right. We have to be inclusive of all kinds of licensed childcare when we're talking about building this system. I think that's a great point.
Thanks for that.
I think the other thing that I'll say too is that the signing of an agreement doesn't mean that everything's figured out either. There's still
absolutely
work to be done, and I think that's sort of what you're alluding to, Dawn, is that provinces have signed these agreements, but there's going to be tons of work to figure out how it actually happens, and it's not going to happen overnight, right? It can be phased in. There'll be lots of work to do.
Okay. I'm just running through the typed in questions right now, and then I'll shift to unmuting people to ask them verbally.
Sure.
So one was from Catherine Sutherland. How do you see the private daycare's acceptance in the $10 a day? How will this work? I know Minister Hussein did talk about that, but it would be great, I think, for this in the recording so that everybody can hear it again.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawn, do you want to touch on that? Do you want me to?
Sure. No, I can start, and Jen, by all means, jump in. So this is one of the big things that has come certainly on our Facebook and social media or Twitter, as well as I'm sure with AECEA as well. I want to be really clear about this. The Canada-wide plan is about everybody. It is about all hands on deck. Whether you are in a not-for-profit or public program, or if you're in a for-profit program, everybody is a part of the system. As I said earlier, we know that the sector didn't have enough spaces before. We know that these issues that are so structural need to be fixed for everybody. And so that is an important thing for everybody to keep in mind, that everybody and every program is a part of the system. Going forward, that's where the difference comes in. The difference comes in that expansion is primarily going to be in the not-for-profit sector. Okay, that's language straight out of the budget, primarily in the not-for-profit sector. And as you read through the agreements in the provinces and territory that have signed, you see that reflected. You see that reflected in those agreements, just in the broader talking points. Now, how they're actually action planning it, that's something outside of just a few provinces. We haven't seen that yet, but Nova Scotia is a good example that's done quite a bit on that front already. But nobody, as long as they want to be part of the system to help solve all these issues that we've talked about, is going to be shut out.
Dawn, can I clarify one thing?
Sure.
So You're talking about anybody who's operating within the licensed, regulated
Yes,
sector
good
of
point.
early learning and childcare, right? So you're
Yes,
talking,
yeah,
when Catherine said the word private, she's meaning centers that
yeah,
are
okay,
for-profit. But I
okay.
just wanted to clarify that, because definitely I think there has been a strong direction from the federal government that we're talking licensed early learning and
Yes.
childcare.
Yeah, great point. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that clarification.
And I think,
Another-
I just want to add something, because I think in Alberta, this has been a really heated question, because we have so many different sort of models of, we have not-for-profit and we have private operators and we have and for-profit and lots of different things. But I think using the umbrella of licensed early learning and childcare is a sort of what fits better right here, that all licensed and regulated programs fit into this $10 a day system. So nobody is being, if you're under that licensed and regulated, you're all going to fit into it. It doesn't matter sort of what your structure is, I guess, in between that. And then, like Dawn said, going forward, decisions will be made about what expansion looks like, because we know we're going to need more spaces, because more people will be able to access early learning and childcare, and we already don't have enough spaces. So it's in the expansion where that, you know, there's going to be things to work out. But to start with, if you're a licensed facility-based or home-based, whichever one, you fit underneath this umbrella. So I think that licensed umbrella is sort of a better way to think about it, as we get started on kind of advocating to our government around, let's get signed up.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Leah. That's good.
This may be a question that can't be easily answered, but what is your best guess when Alberta could sign on to this agreement? I mean, hopes would be today, but
At 8:13 p.m. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure if Dawn has a guess. I think it's going to be sooner than later. Just from our conversations with the ECD branch, they were waiting for the cabinet ministers to be sort of decided on, because I think that's where the level of negotiations happens. And so with the cabinet being announced, I would assume it's going to the negotiations will restart quite quickly. What do you think, Dawn?
Yeah, I think Alberta's every rumbling I'm hearing, as you just said, Jennifer, is that it'll be soon. You'll be hearing something very soon.
But your advocacy is not wasted if you still, you know, want to push for it, because like we said, once those agreements happen, there'll just be lots of details to still work out. So definitely be writing to your MLAs and the minister and that kind of thing.
So this one, Dawn, you would likely be the best one to answer it. With the provinces that have the pensions, is the contribution made by the province, or are they employer funded for the matching funds?
No, those are made by the province. Yeah, those matching dollars are they go the center. Essentially, the programs front the money and then they're reimbursed by the province, but it's still fully funded by the province. And I should also note there too that we did some data gathering in Saskatchewan, not last year, the year before. And one of the things we were really excited to see actually in Saskatchewan, I don't know what it's like in Alberta, but there were a lot of childcare programs that were contributing to RRSPs for their staff. I'm not suggesting that they were, you know, in dramatic numbers, but they did put something in place for them. And so I can tell you that in both Manitoba and Quebec, where they have the formal pensions, that doesn't replace, for the most part, those other privately, shall we say, those employer-funded contributions. So if the employer still wanted to continue an RRSP plan, they're more than welcome to. they're more than welcome to. And I know many, many, many who do. But yeah, specific to what I was talking about before, that public pension piece, that is funded by the provincial governments.
That's great. Thanks, Dawn. So I am going to shift over to hands raised. So Catherine Sutherland, you've been unmuted on my end. You may just need to unmute yourself if you'd like to speak.
Hi there. So yeah, my question back to that, how does it work for the profits? We are a licensed center. It's not, we're not private. We're not, you know,
Unlicensed.
Unlicensed, yeah, we are licensed. So,
Great.
yeah, so we don't know really how that's going to work, right? And you guys all think it's going to happen soon, which I'm not dreaming. But maybe that's why we're getting all these grant forms to sign right now. I thought it was for the preschools, but yeah, so
we've definitely seen a lot of the federal government also did put in workforce funding agreements with the provinces. So lots of that grant funding that we're talking about with release time, PD, and there's other initiatives that we've heard will be coming forward as well. All of that is federal money that's being directed towards the workforce. But yeah, we're really hoping that that kind of stuff is continued when a system is being built with that federal. Right. Yeah, thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Okay, so another one that I think is very relevant to today's Alberta is this $10 a day daycare program only for daycares that operate from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. or are they looking at things for shift workers as well, like outside of that typical realm of childcare?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. This is, again, when we talk about building a system, it's not just about Monday to Friday, 7 to 6 or whatever the time you mentioned there, Laura. It's also about creating childcare that's affordable and accessible for shift workers, for folks that work on weekends, folks that work in evenings, so on and so forth, because we know that not every family fits into that dynamic, right? And how many families don't need 5 days a week but have to pay for 5 days a week because it's just how we're structured. So no, this is about breaking out of those ways of doing things and offering more flexibility to families. And I think Jennifer said it really well. It's not the snap of a finger that's going to fix everything. You know, so let's just say Alberta signs their agreement this week. It's not going to immediately change as of Monday, but we're starting to put into motion those structures and those foundations and fixing those structures and foundations that help to build that flexible, accessible system.
Thanks, Dawn. So back to the phones. Cody Top, you've been unmuted. You may just need to unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Hey, Cody. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for letting me speak. Yeah, no, actually, Dawn, this one was for you. With school age being specific as my bag, I want to know with other provinces, has there anything been specifically earmarked or even looked at, whether through it's BC, Nova Scotia, or whatever, in particular to school age?
Yeah, it's funny. The announcement really, the federal announcement really did focus, Cody, as you know, on 0 to 5. It was very interesting. But if I go back to I believe it was the Manitoba announcement, Minister Stephenson talked about their agreement being 0, I think it was 0 to age 7, something like that, but it was more than 5, I can tell you that. But again, we haven't seen the details as to what that actually means. So there is that, and then Cody, you know this well because we've talked about it before. There's still that from the 2019 election, which seems like it was just yesterday, even though we did the 2021 election, whole other conversation. There was a commitment from the federal government in that election to put about $500 million into school age care and make it more affordable for families. I don't know where that's at, whether that has fallen off their radar completely or whether that just needs to be dusted off and brought back to the table. But you know, right now I think, yeah, Manitoba more so than anyone else has, you know, made some nod to school age care there, or Cody.
I think that's great. Thanks, Don. I know there was a big commitment originally, and that just kind of dissipated a little bit. So if I can put the bug in anybody else's ear, you know, this is something that we need to advocate for in Alberta. Is focusing
absolutely.
on.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, another on the phone. Sherry McAllister, you've been unmuted. If you may just need to unmute yourself.
Awesome. Hi. Thanks. My question, I've been in all aspects of this field, is there any focus or any money or any dollars being allocated in these agreements to educate management side of centers, both profit and nonprofit, so that the gap between what's ideal and what educators know and what they're learning in school and what they see in the research to the reality that's out there? Because in Alberta, it's a pretty diverse system from what I can see. And, you know, I see really great centers out there doing great things with people that are in it for the right reasons. And there's still some really sketchy stuff going on out there. Just how do we make it better for everyone? Because that's why the industry loses so many people, right? You learn all this, you love what you do, but you become so disillusioned that you go find something better.
Yeah. Jen?
Yeah, I was just going to say I would hope that we're looking at, you know, leaders and management and advancing education in those areas as well. I think too what Amanda was talking about with pedagogical partners and really being able to be reflective educators, it really can make a big difference between what you're saying with the theory you learn in school and then your practice on the floor. Dawn, is there anything specific in some of the agreements? Do you know?
No, but that, to me, what a great question, because leadership is so important, and leadership, you know, we need to foster it, and it's like everything we're talking about here. None of this happens by chance. It happens by design. And so leadership of a program is just as integral as an ECE in a program, right? We know this. And if we look at other nations that have built universal systems or nationwide systems, if we take from their examples, there will be professional learning and professional opportunities to foster leadership and foster managers. Pedagogical, as you know, Amanda talked about, but also, you know, on human resource levels, you know, in all aspects of managing a program. There have been, just quickly, in a few provinces, actual post-diploma programs in leadership and management, and specific to childcare. You know, they don't stick around for a long time because, well, they tend to cost quite a bit of money and our sector doesn't have enough money, but it doesn't mean there isn't interest there. Lots of interest there. So there are certainly examples from within Canada. There's international examples, and I would absolutely say again, as we flesh out these workforce strategies, leadership has to be an integral piece of that.
Amanda, did you want to make a comment? I saw you popped up, so maybe you wanted to talk.
Our director is like queen bee, amazing. It's like she creates leaders all the time, every day, you know. She looks at parallel practice too, like, so it's like we're her kids almost, you know, in a way. And the way that her attitude is like, she's not micromanaging, you know, she's not all over the place, you know, He gives us some freedom. And I think the most important part, though, that I can emphasize is from working in those previous 2 centers that I did, the management was terrible. Like, I can't even, it was a disaster there. And even before the grant and training and everything like that, like they were already set. Like, you know, there's no doubt why Tyra won the AECEA Early Childhood Educator of the Year, like hands down. You know, she wrote our grant. It takes those people that like literally have that passion, not meaning that they're gonna like set like, you know, work life is just consuming, but it's like they know how to instill that passion in other people and those goals. And, you know, without her, I don't know if, like, you know, not saying that Thornhill wouldn't know what to do either, but like, she knew exactly what the community needed. And it's somebody like that. And she has her degree and had her degree in child and youth studies. You know, she knew what it was like to work with low income families and middle income families. Like, she had that extra education that really helped her to like build and make those, like, she went out to different agencies in the community and made sure that they supported her and supported our community, our center. And I think that is like a key point, you know, because it trickles down. It totally makes sense. You know, they know, like, the educated people and passionate people, they know how to move things forward, and she's definitely done that. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda.
Well, I think we've used lots of time, and I appreciate everyone who's stuck around with us this evening. And Dawn, we appreciate you because you're in a different time zone than us, so it's later for you. So we thank you very much for staying with us. And, you know, if you have put a question in the question box that hasn't been answered, we can see those afterwards. We do try and touch base with people, so don't worry that your question won't be answered. If you do want to reach out to AECEA and ask another question, you can certainly do that if you watch the recording later. So the conversation is definitely not over. So please stay involved with AECEA and follow us on all the social media bits. All the places where you can follow us on social media, and be a part of this conversation, because, as you know, particularly in Alberta, this conversation and advocacy is not over by any means, because we don't have an agreement and we don't know what those bits are going to look like. And even after there is an agreement, that's when the work starts of really building this system. So thanks so much, Jennifer and Dawn, for being with us tonight. Thank you, everyone, for your questions and your feedback. And I think we even have another AECEA Connect scheduled for next month. So
we do, yes.
Be on the lookout for that.
Yes, great. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a nice night.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Bye, everybody.